What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here for another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. I greatly appreciate all of y'all tuning in tonight. Wednesday night, I originally put out a tweet this morning that said I wouldn't be live. Fortunately, for you guys, I am live. This podcast is live Wednesday night. 7:56, 4 minutes early, better early than late, as I always say. And there's a lot to discuss tonight in regards to the Buffalo Bills and the coaching changes, promotions, signings, retainings, I guess you could say, in tonight's show. So I'm really excited to dive into that as well, provide you guys my Super Bowl preview and prediction. Unfortunately for the Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers, I'll just call a spade and say that this was not the Super Bowl that I was rooting for. This was not the Super Bowl that I was hoping for. This was the matchup that I least wanted to see because I already saw it 4 years ago, and I didn't like the way that it ended 4 years ago. Hopefully, it's the same matchup with a different result. As a little bit of the preview to the prediction, which I'll dive into at the end of tonight's show. So first off, I want to state that this show, of course, is sponsored by none other than 26shirts.com. Shout out to Superfan, Buffalo Bills Superfan, and I think the future mayor of Buffalo, Del Reed, putting together a ton of great t-shirt ideas for the Bills Mafia, doing some stuff with the 10 Lives Club, which has been a big focal point in the Western New York community these last few weeks, and it's really great to see those causes continue to raise funds for the causes that they represent. So Del Reed, great guy, great company, really proud to have them as a sponsor of the show, along with the Buffalo Fanbase Podcast Network, which is where you're tuning into this show on YouTube, as well as the Thomas Take Sports Podcast on any and all podcasting platforms. Could be Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, the Buffalo Fanbase on X as well. You guys have been very interactive with me, so I greatly appreciate you guys showing your support, you guys corresponding with me throughout this season. Feel free to continue to do so as I go live all off season long for the Buffalo Bills and more. So with that being said, I want to definitely dive into your tweets that you guys tweeted to me earlier this morning. I didn't anticipate that I would be able to go live, but I was able to go live tonight. So really happy that, I can do that for you guys so that I could then answer some questions, concerns that you guys may have or might not have. So we'll get to those as this show wears on as well. But I want to start off first and foremost with the biggest piece of Buffalo Bills news, the most recent piece of Buffalo Bills news, and that is that the Buffalo Bills named Bobby Babich the new defensive coordinator, promoted from within the organization. Bobby Babich, this is, first off, really cool. The fact that we had a coach that had been here for a few years, promoted from within, and his dad used to coach here. So that makes this news even more interesting, even more cool. And this was a move that I saw coming. The writing was on the wall, essentially, for this news to be announced to the Bills Mafia, due to the fact that I think the Bills losing Eric Washington to Chicago kind of made it seem like this was the option they were going with. Eric Washington probably knew that full well, wanted to be a defensive coordinator in this league. And when Washington left to go to Chicago, Bobby Babich was essentially their guy. That's what kind of was a tall tale sign for me. With Washington leaving, Bobby Babich comes in and is their guy, was their guy, which was why Eric Washington wanted to go to Chicago. And there's a lot of questions with this move because last season, my biggest concern outside of Ken Dorsey being the OC for the Buffalo Bills, my biggest concern was whether or not Sean McDermott could handle the obligation of being the head coach and the defensive coordinator. And ultimately, as the season came to a close, much sooner than we all wanted to, I felt like that was the one concern that actually was right. That was the one concern that was actually made right, as not a legitimate concern. I thought Sean McDermott did a wonderful job as the head coach and D coordinator, calling the defense essentially with the amount of injuries that defense suffered. And the last one, I think, being a final crushing blow to the Bills' season, Terrell Bernard going out in the Pittsburgh wildcard game, not allowing him to play in that game against Kansas City the following week in the AFC divisional round. Sean McDermott was stretched pretty thin in terms of what he could do defensively, in terms of his defensive play calls, and they still, had moments of success throughout the season, a lot of moments of success. So what type of defense will we be seeing here? Is it going to be this 4-2-5? Is it going to be something that we've seen in previous years? And I think a lot of that has to do with the personnel package, the players that we're going to have or the players that we're not going to have. And a lot of those questions fall in line with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. So much of this 4-2-5 and why Sean McDermott was able to implement it so well over the course of the last 6-7 years with the success and even some of the failures that it had was due to the fact that the success due to Poyer and Hyde being on the field at the same time. The big question with the roster, number one, that's looming is whether or not Micah Hyde is or is not coming back. And we don't quite know that yet. But I will tell you, thus far, due to the news that we've seen thus far, it appears as if Micah Hyde is going to hang up the cleats, hang up the helmet. We don't know that yet, but it's trending that way. Goodbye messages to Bills Mafia from his wife. Thank you messages to Bills Mafia from his wife. I have a feeling that we're not going to be seeing Micah Hyde return. That's just my gut feeling. I have no source on that, but that's just how I feel in terms of what I have seen since this season came to a close. And if that's the case, do the Bills just wash, rinse, repeat, replace? There's no replacing a guy like Micah Hyde, but do they move forward with that 4-2-5? Does Sean McDermott relinquish some of the defensive play calling duties to Bobby Babich? I honestly don't know. And that's intriguing. That's something that we won't know until training camp time. But if I'm Sean McDermott, I probably wouldn't be as willing to relinquish that because everybody thought that he wasn't going to do a good job. He did a very good job. But maybe with this promotion, maybe being that Bobby Babich had been in this system for quite some time, maybe Sean McDermott will now entrust Bobby Babich to run this defense, as a lot of the guys on this defense, not just the linebackers, not just the D linemen, but the entire defense is in full support of this promotion, which maybe Bobby Babich was somebody that was a figure in Sean McDermott's mind that, created those more aggressive opportunities defensively for Buffalo to implement. And that's what I'd like to see. I don't like to see a defense on the back foot. I don't like to see a defense that is reactionary. I like to see a defense that's aggressive. And I think that that's a huge feather in the cap of some of these new players that the Bills have added these last few years, the Epinezas, the Rousseaus, the Terrell Bernards. Those guys being a big part of their future should be made as a big priority of their future, could implement that more so. So I'm really excited to see what this materializes into. I think it's a move that is pretty telling. You go back a year ago and ultimately Leslie Frazier and the Bills mutually reportedly decided to part ways. Seemed like Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott stated afterwards that it was Frazier that wanted to take a little bit of a break, could potentially come back. It was never in the realm of possibility. There was no realm of possibility that Leslie Frazier was ever coming back once he left. I'd like to put it in a better term, but that was just a flat out lie. It was a mutual parting of ways. Bills didn't want him around. He didn't want to be a part of this anymore. They part ways with no intent on him coming back whatsoever, no communication as to whether he was coming back whatsoever. That, I can tell you, with the utmost certainty, as Leslie Frazier's basically saying, take it or leave it. I want to be a head coach in the National Football League. If I'm not going to be that, then you can just toss it aside. Very limited opportunities for Leslie Frazier at this point, as 7 of the 8 head coaching vacancies are fulfilled. So I don't see Leslie Frazier getting his opportunity being a head coach in this league. So at this point, so that's just where it stands right now in regards to that, how the tangled web was weaved the last year with this defensive coordinator position. Leslie Frazier, longtime D coordinator, right? Sean McDermott takes the mantle and is now handing that off to Bobby Babich, which I'm excited about. I hope to see more aggressiveness out of this defense. Hope to see more pressure on the quarterback with the plans that they have in the future in the coming months. We could potentially see some new defensive linemen, definitely some new defensive tackles at the very least that could implement what I'm looking for. So as well, something that I have not talked about on this show just yet, Joe Brady remains the OC of the Buffalo Bills. And to me, this was a no-brainer in terms of prioritizing this for the front office. Sean McDermott made a valid judgment call. I would argue a little too late, by the way, but made a valuable judgment call to move on from Ken Dorsey and promote from within Joe Brady. That's typically what happens when an OC gets fired in season, mid-season in this case. And Joe Brady took that spot. I thought he did very well in that spot. The record indicates he did very well. The production statistics indicate that Joe Brady did extremely well. But I thought that there was a chance Joe Brady could leave, just like Brian Daboll left. Anytime you have an offensive coordinator that's successful in this league, typically he is going to leave. Typically he's going to seek another opportunity via being a head coach in the pros or in college. And we just saw the the head coach rather, for the Boston College Golden Eagles get hired as the DC for Green Bay. Building blocks in coaching are very important. And this was a massive building block for Joe Brady to take this opportunity, thrive and flourish, and then take it to the next level. What is that next level? It's remaining either an OC in Buffalo to then put yourself in a solid situation as a head coach. And I think this is the best opportunity for Joe Brady to continue to flourish before taking something on that's too big too soon. And you look around the league, I'd be off mark here if I didn't mention Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions offensive coordinator. He gets a head coaching interview with the Washington Commanders, and he said, you know what? I feel really good about where I'm at, being a part of this staff here in Detroit, working under Dan Campbell. I want to pad my resume a little bit within this opportunity and then see what's out there after that. No harm in that. I think that that's a really smart decision. Is it a shocking decision, as Ben Johnson was listed as one of the hottest, head coaching candidates? Yes, it is. But Joe Brady, on the flip side, could have sought out other opportunities and recognized, you know what, this is actually the best opportunity for me to grow as a coach, pad my resume, and get me to where I want to go eventually, with a potentially better opportunity head coaching wise, one that he would be more ready for. So let's do this. Let's read the Thomas Take tweet sheet. I want to start off. I had tweeted this morning, send me some questions, Bills Mafia. I am recording my podcast today. Won't be able to go live. I am live. So feel free to fire away some comments here. Sheila at She2. Do you think we should keep Poyer or allow him to leave if he wants? Jordan Poyer's under contract for another year. So I think Poyer is a safe bet to stick around. Scott of 24/7 Buffalo Fandemonium, he said, will Bobby Babich be a puppet to Sean McDermott's scheme, or will he be allowed to implement his own philosophies? That kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Babich earlier. I think that's a unknown right now at this point, Scott. But that's a story that we'll know more of. We'll know the answer to that in training camp, in the preseason, heading into the regular season. And to be quite fair, I feel like it's a big vote of confidence from McDermott to put Bobby Babich in this spot. I feel like he wouldn't have put Bobby Babich in this spot if he wasn't going to let Babich have a little bit of a say, maybe not a full say, but a little bit of a say in terms of a collaborative effort between Babich and McDermott moving forward. Michael Anderson at Anders M09 says, what gets the Buffalo Bills past the Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs? This is realistic based on that is realistic based on the cap situation. So this goes back, Michael, to this goes back to 2 shows ago from myself. So rather than wallowing in that loss against the Kansas City Chiefs once again in the AFC divisional round, I wanted to come up with a solution to the issue. What am I seeing from this 2023-2024 team that needs to be different in 2024-2025, right? And to me, what separates the teams that the Bills have had trouble against and the Buffalo Bills themselves is firepower at the offensive skill positions, namely wide receiver. So you go back last year, their hands were tied cap-wise. They weren't in a position to take a top-flight wideout. 4 wide receivers in the 2023 draft went in a row, which, they knew they needed to get a pass catcher. They went out and got the best tight end in the draft class, Dalton Kincaid. They traded up a couple spots, by the way, to do so. And you look at Cincinnati, you look at Minnesota, you look at some of these teams that have these really well-faceted passing attacks. They have multiple wide receivers to get the ball to. Buffalo does not. Buffalo's got one really good wideout, an average at best wide receiver 2, and a rising, definitely intriguing player as a wide receiver 3 that the Bills didn't utilize hardly at all last season in Khalil Shakir. So realistically, I think they need to add 3 wide receivers. Last year, they added 2. They were essentially on 1-year deals. Trent Sherfield, Deontay Hardy. I did not like the contributions from either one of those players. To me, it wasn't enough to keep them around. That's just where I'm coming from on that. That's my opinion. That's my take. Sherfield had a big moment in the division clinching game against Miami. Deontay Hardy had a game-changing moment in that game. But outside of that, neither one of those guys really did a whole lot. So to me, I feel like you need to replace Gabe Davis. He was not enough. And those 2 guys were not enough. You need more production. You need more skill, more size, body, catch radius, all those fancy terms that we're going to hear from Mel Kiper on ESPN throughout this draft season. We need more of those, physical, new breed wide receivers that a lot of these teams have that are doing better than Buffalo. And yeah, I'd even include Kansas City in that mix too. Kansas City doesn't have Stephon Diggs, obviously, but they have sound receivers that just catch the ball and get open as best as they can. Where I think Mahomes makes up for that a little bit. If you were to put great receivers with Mahomes, we know what happens. Could you imagine what would happen to Josh Allen if you were to put, 2-3 deep wide receivers out there and see what he could do? I think that's the biggest difference, Michael, between the Buffalo Bills and the elite teams in this league in general. Tom Nazaro, L Train 22. Why do we shop at Gucci for defense and shop at Dollar Tree for offense? And it's a great question. It's a great question, Tom. So defensively, this is a foundationally defensive organization. Sean McDermott, defensive coach, the guys around him, the guys that have been a part of his staff, more defensive minded that have stuck with him. The guys that have had success with Sean McDermott on offense have either left or they haven't worked out. So that's just coaching wise. Now, being that they're structured that way, coaching wise, I think that that's why they're spending more capital on their defense, coaching it up with higher talent. They're able to seek and find the talent easier on the defensive side of the ball than they are the offensive side. I think that's a fair estimation, especially if you go back and you look at their draft classes in previous years. You'd see they've had much more success drafting defense than they have offense. They've drafted more defense than they have offense, which goes back to my point. You need more offense. You need more weapons. You need a wide receiver in the first round in 2024's NFL draft. That's just my take. But that's why. I think their coaching philosophy, the structure of their organization, they're able to value and view defensive talent in a little bit easier form and function than they are offense. And I think that that's why their offense has been what it's been. That's why guys like Ken Dorsey didn't work out. That's why they haven't been able to get over the hump against Kansas City. So the next tweet is at Rubio_who_dis, D-I-S. He says, was it Brady, Joe Brady, or Sean McDermott who called the touchdown play with under 2 minutes to go versus the Chiefs? Josh made the right read to Shakir, but the play should have been to get the yards and eat the clock. So I think from that question, honestly, there's no answer to that I have. I would say Brady called the play because he's the offensive coordinator. Once that play is called, it's up for the players to execute and achieve the best results possible given the opposing defense, right? If Josh Allen's pressured, he's got to check it down. If somebody's open down the field, Josh Allen's obviously going to throw them the ball. So I really think that this was one of those questions that I don't think this is what lost the Bills the game against Kansas City. I think there was a lot of moments in this game that we can go back and look at and say, that came up short, that came up short, this came up short. Those types of moments, you change one or two of those, they beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and they're in the AFC title game against who I thought was a fraudulent AFC 1 seed in the Baltimore Ravens, and that's pretty right on the money about that. I knew whoever won this game between the Chiefs and the Bills would be in the Super Bowl. So last couple tweets here. Jason the Mason, he says, why should I have any faith left in the divisional round and to go to the divisional round and lose any time? Every single time. So he's basically saying, why should I have any faith as a Bills fan? The Bills are just going to go to the divisional round and lose. Hey, man, Deion Dawkins said it best. You're either with us or you're not. Good luck if you're not. If you are, welcome aboard. Each season's different. The results have been the same. The end result has been the same, but the process and how they got there, we could hang our heads on the end result, but the process and how they got back to the divisional round was pretty legendary. 6-6, backs against the wall. They ran the table. They got to 11-6. They won the division. They got the 2 seed. They beat the Steelers fair and square. And then few missed plays was the difference in that game, guys. They're not that far off from KC. It's just on that night, a couple plays weren't made. Had they been made, they would have won the game. It's just the way it is. So Hunter Hayden, the last tweet on the Thomas Take tweet sheet, he says, how much longer until the Bills fire McDud, referring to McDermott? 1 or 2 more disappointing seasons? ? So I've said this all along. It's not the first time, Hunter, that I've been asked this question. So in terms of Sean McDermott, to me, this year has to be a year where the Bills make at the very least, the AFC Championship game. If they come up short again, even shorter than they did this past year, I think Sean McDermott could be gone. That being said, he's got 3 years left on his contract. So that's 3 years, first year next year, year after that, and a year after that. So he's got some time left on this deal here. So I don't see him going anywhere ultimately. Would I move on if the Bills didn't get any further? Yes, I would. Will the Pegulas? I don't know. Glad I don't have to make those decisions, though, because I feel like I'd make them at a little bit more of a feverish pace than what we've seen in recent years. So that's the last of the tweet sheet. Let's get to the final point of tonight's show. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not thrilled in the slightest about this Super Bowl. I feel like this was the worst result that I could come up with in my mind. To see the fact that, my bad on that. Going back to the comments here on Facebook. So to see the fact that the Niners and the Chiefs made it to this Super Bowl when we just saw this matchup 4 years ago, and it doesn't feel that long ago, but shortly thereafter, COVID happened, and it just, one thing led to another. It was brutal, and then Tampa beat Kansas City in the Super Bowl the 1 year after that. And so it's almost like we got to go back and watch that Super Bowl, because a lot of the guys on these two teams are very much the same, but they're very different. The Kansas City Chiefs, they don't have Tyreek Hill going into the Super Bowl, right? The San Francisco 49ers didn't have Chase Young, which I thought was one of the best trades that a team has made in recent years. The San Francisco 49ers didn't have Christian McCaffrey. The San Francisco 49ers didn't have a guy that I think is highly disrespected at this point in his career, and that's none other than quarterback Brock Purdy. So to me, within this Super Bowl, I think there's two teams, of course, that make it to the final dance. One team is better going into a game, but that doesn't matter. Anything can happen in this game, right? But to me, I think the 49ers are a considerably better team in total than the Kansas City Chiefs. If I were to put together a power ranking of the best 10 players going into the Super Bowl, which I probably will do, spoiler alert, I think 8 out of the 10 would be 49ers players. The only 2 that I'd pick, maybe 3 that I'd pick for the Chiefs, would be Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and either Pacheco or Harrison Butker. Maybe they got 4 in those 4 names. One of them is a kicker. So that just goes to show you, Chris Jones is great, but I think nobody thinks he is as great as Chris Jones thinks he is. Nobody thinks Chris Jones is as elite as Chris Jones himself. And I'm not saying he's a bad player. I'm not saying he's not great. He is great. But this guy on the field is a nightmare to watch. One of the dirtiest players in the National Football League, bar none. The Chiefs as a whole are an extremely dirty team. So keep our eyes out for that. Christian McCaffrey, be prepared for that. I wouldn't be shocked if he got taken out of this game off of something that was completely ridiculous. So I think the 49ers are going to win this Super Bowl, and I think it's going to be a very dominant victory. And I'm not going to necessarily say that the 49ers are going to win, by 3 touchdowns. I think it'll be a close-ish game, but I think the Chiefs are going to be playing from behind from early on in this game. The 49ers defense is one of the best in the NFL. As it stands, it's easily the best in the NFC. That's how they helped themselves get here to represent the NFC. But there's been trades made by John Lynch that have made this defense even that much more dynamic. To have Joey Bosa on one side, and then to have, or Nick Bosa rather, right? One of the Bosas on one side, and then to have, of course, Chase Young on the other side. That's pretty remarkable. So Fred Warner, great player. My guy Debo out there, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. I mean, I love the Niners team. I think that they're going to win this one. And it's not wishful thinking. It is, but it isn't. I really do believe that the 49ers are going to get it done this time around. They got vengeance on their mind, and I think that they can get it done. So I'm going Niners for the Super Bowl prediction. All right, last comment here on Facebook. Eric James says Bobby will be a great DC. He showed up huge as a position coach multiple times with this team. Not happy with how the year ended, but they better draft a wide receiver in the first round. I'm all about it. It's been a long, long time since the Bills drafted a wide receiver in the first round. 2014, 10 years it's been since they drafted a wide receiver in the first round, none other than Sammy Watkins. Didn't necessarily turn out. There was a different time for different reasons as to why that didn't work out. This team is a much different team. I'd like to think that if Sammy Watkins was on the team with Josh Allen, his career would have went a lot differently. So, time to get Josh Allen more weapons, more in the arsenal. You already have started that process with Dalton Kincaid and James Cook. You have to keep adding to this offense in order to keep up in this arms race that is the AFC, especially the AFC East, which will be better in 2024 than what it was in 2023. I don't know by how much, but it will be better. The Patriots will be better than what they were. The Jets will be a little bit better than what they were. Miami is going to be around. So Buffalo, being the beast of the East that they've been these last 4 years, let's make it 5. I think the biggest way you can do that is adding more firepower for Josh Allen to get the ball to. And I rest my case. A lot to dive into tonight. This offseason's just gotten started for the Buffalo Bills. The Super Bowl hasn't even finished yet, and yet we got so much to talk about these Bills. Plenty to discuss as this offseason rolls on. Stay tuned. Stay dialed in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast all offseason long. I'll provide you my analysis, my takes, and respond to your takes as well. Thank you so much, Bills Mafia, for tuning in tonight. Last and certainly not least, nobody circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills.